Hi, I'm Carole Robinson. Welcome to this edition of County Happenings, where we find out what's happening in the county by talking to the county mayor, Roger Anderson, the man in the know.
Well, I don't know that I know, but there's a lot going on in Williamson.
Yeah.
Where has the year gone?
2017 has just flown. It should start all over again, I think.
Well, it is, but it's going to be 2018. It is just here. It is here.
Yeah.
What a phenomenon. I think I must be getting older. Of course, the gray hair would give me away, not for you. But it just seems that the holiday seasons of Christmas and New Year, which we wish everyone a happy holiday period of time, of Christmas and New Year's and Hanukkah and all the others, but they just seem to come around so fast.
Yeah, it just seems like we're just recovering from it from last year, and then all of a sudden it's back again. And so people like me, we start buying Christmas presents all year long because...
Don't you remember, though, Carole,
Yeah.
when you were a young boy, a young girl, from Thanksgiving to the time Santa
wouldn't come
Claus,
fast
it
enough.
just couldn't come fast
I know
enough. And as a boy, I was in rural East Tennessee, and we didn't have a lot. I mean, Mom and Dad gave us plenty of food, as you can see. Well, I can't blame all that on Mom. But we didn't miss a meal.
No.
We had good warm clothes and a house that was a lot of love in it. But, oh my goodness, you couldn't wait to get that new pair of jeans, or we always had fruit given to us at Christmas time, because that was something we just didn't have, or nuts. And
Great big orange.
big oranges. And we had a container, we called them a Lazy Susan. I don't mean to insult anybody with
But
a
that's
name,
what it's called,
It
yeah.
was called a Lazy Susan and had nuts in it. And it had a nut cracker. Remember
Yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah.
It looked like a big V.
Yep.
And you'd grab one of those. And then Dad, we had down in kind of the basement of the house, had a big old stove. And they kept that thing cranked up, you know. But he would put a boiling pot of water, keeps moisture in the air, and he had peanuts he would roast.
Oh, he roasted his
And he
own.
roasted
Oh,
his
my
own
gosh.
peanuts. He would pick them up. I don't know where he'd get them from work or whatever. And they were always down there, and they were in a pan, and those are memories that I have. But you couldn't get Christmas here quick enough.
No, it couldn't. And Christmas Eve lasted forever. That was my favorite part, though. We'd go to, we'd have a big, what my mother would call Holy Supper, the 7 fishes.
Right.
And then go to midnight mass. And there was 8 of us. Filing in to midnight mass and trying to stay awake during during mass.
Now, you're a reporter for the paper. Next year, about September, October, you ought to come out with a caption. Tell us your favorite
Christmas story.
story or tradition, and get people to write that in. And I'll write mine in, because I know what they are. I mean, it was, like I said, we didn't have a lot, but what we had, we were proud of. And I know there are a lot of people out there that had a lot less than we did. But
You just didn't know. There was, because you had so many other things, the love, the activities,
Yes.
the traditions. It kind of overshadowed the fact that you didn't have much, because you had so much other things.
I don't know that I've eaten this particular pie since I left home, but they call them a mince meat pie.
I used to hear about that a lot. It just didn't sound like something I'd ever
I
want to try.
I know. And rhubarb pie. Some of the older ones that, of course, Mom was an excellent cook, but she could just put it, of course, it was cornbread, beans, and taters for the most part. But those pies and desserts at Thanksgiving and Christmas time, chocolate pie, pecan pie, the cakes, and there was
Cookies,
and you
barrels
know,
of cookies.
no wonder we wound up with chubby cheeks at Christmas.
When we used to go Christmas caroling Christmas Eve, I forgot about that. After dinner, Mom would just shove us out the door so she could clean up, and we'd go Christmas caroling down the street to all the neighbors' houses.
Well, they're memories that we all have. Our children, our grandchildren will have them of those special events. And yes, you think about the things that weren't as pleasant too. That's just part of growing up that we live in. I remember my dad's mother came to live with us for a period of time in the latter stages of her life, And, but at that particular this holiday period of some 60 days there, she would light up, and I would just remember that. But that was what people did back
Yeah.
then.
You took care of your own.
You took care of your own. Their parents came to live, and as a kid, you didn't think anything about it. But what an unbelievable stress load to your parents, your mom, your dad, working and having to tend to your mom. And I don't mean that having to in the sense that it's forced on you. It's just what you did.
What you did, yeah, you did. So, well, speaking of what you did.
Yeah, what you did.
What's going on? So what's going on around this county, Mr. Mayor?
Well, just recently, Williamson County voted, the county commissioners voted to take a legal journey down the road with prescription drugs, mainly opioids, and the effect that they're having on our community. So let me tell the end of the story first, and then we'll kind of explain how we got there. The end of the story was they took the vote. It was 20-1. We had a couple, 2 or 3, that weren't able to make it on a special call meeting. Over the last 60 days, we have been looking at what are drugs doing to our community. And I say we, the sheriff and the legal team and myself, looking at what's happening to us.
We're taking a pill for everything.
Yes. And the effects that is having on government services, whether it's your law enforcement community, whether it's your healthcare community, whether it's just the general public in general, whether it's you as an individual family, that the drugs that are being manufactured and have been manufactured for the last 30 and 40 years, and you got to go back into the 60s and 70s when some of these class drugs began to enter the market. Some of them referred to as statins, some of them. The drugs in themselves are needed by you and I. Most everyone knows the show that my late wife died about 9.5 years ago, and in that last stage of her life for cancer, those drugs not only took away that pain, but it also just kind of put her in a stage of suspension.
La La Land.
La La Land. So drugs in themselves are not bad. It's how the addiction process is. It's how, like so many other things get started, it's called abuse. I firmly believe that we all have a responsibility that as individuals, as parents and grandparents, we need to know those boundaries. Some of us get addicted on tobacco. Some of us get addicted onto alcohol. Some of us get addicted onto drugs. It's not easy to get off any of those.
No.
Once you're hooked onto those. But today, according to the sheriff, Jeff Long, according to some of the medical experts, some of these drugs can kill you by just simply inhaling them, to touch them, and when people are trying to come off from these drugs, they're going to higher class drugs, heroin, fentanyl. Some of these products that are on the market out there will kill you and will kill you instantly. Then we get into the social side of things, that the pill manufacturing, when you've got an addiction, you've got to have it, and so they sell these drugs, what I call out of the back seat of a car. They pick them up at different places and move them throughout the community. All of that's having an impact on us in government, whether it's city, county, state, or fed. It is a huge financial burden. There's about 5 to 6 manufacturers of all the drugs in the world are manufactured and distributed by about 5 or 6 drug companies. 85% of the drugs is what they say. These drug companies also have a responsibility.
Right.
And that's the lawsuit we're going to go with a firm that's has done this in the past, that we as a county, we as a community are saying that if there is a settlement at future date, 5 years, 10 years, that we want to be on the front end of this. We want to be at the table for finding solutions, putting money back in the system that has been taken out because of lost productivity or even costing more on the budget just to supply our law enforcement community with a product called Narcan that keeps people alive. And I think that it will be a situation, and here we are in a healthcare capital of the world, but I do put a lot of responsibility on those drug manufacturers and the distribution of. They're required, and you can find out, they don't like to release it, but every pill of a narcotics value has to know where it's going and who it went to and why it went there. And some of the cases that are coming out, such as in West Virginia, a population of 700 to a million people, 700,000 to a million people, and the number of drugs, there's 3 and 4 times drugs coming in there than there are people. And so how do we get our hands around that? In time, it'll be like the tobacco settlement, I think. And so you're positioning yourself now for down the road for these settlements, for the solutions, and how do we deal with that? I don't think that you and I, as citizens in Williamson County, should have to be, and we will, and we do, we should have a way of hopefully recouping and recovering some of these monies that we're having to spend. So I'm fearful of what the future is going to bring in that area because no one's found a solution for it yet. But that solution also has to include at some point in the future that our children and our grandchildren that are hooked on these things has to be a long-term treatment plan. Has to be a way for them to come back into society. It can't just be a 3-step program or a 9-step program. Right. It has to be a whole change of what we're seeing in our society. And so we Davidson County is looking at, there are several large law firms, but it's so costly for an individual county or city to do the investigation, do the due diligence. So you pair yourself with other cities and counties across the United States and say, we want to be a part of this process, that if there are solutions and if there are settlements, we want to know that we're going to get our part too.
And the state has started several years ago trying to do something about it by controlling the distribution through prescriptions.
Right.
And the clinics that used to be able to dole it
Right.
out. But it seems like it hasn't even affected the.
Well, I think we all understand Williamson County is a wonderful place to live, work, play, worship, great place. We also have a lot of disposable income. And disposable income makes it more accessible for some of these products. The sheriff can tell you that drugs now are almost in every community. There's a way to get those drugs. Sheriff will also tell you that contraband coming into the jails is getting harder and harder to police that from not arriving in.
Wow.
The sheriff will also tell you through documentation that we have that it's growing each year, and law enforcement itself can't just be the only source. It's education. But if you're addicted, if you know someone that's ever been addicted to something, to just totally withdraw from that particular product, whatever it is, it's almost impossible. Now,
It's getting more and more difficult.
Yes.
Because it's stronger and it's affecting more parts of your body.
Williamson Medical Center, excellent place to have health care delivered and rendered to you in times of need. Also, a lot of babies over there are born. We don't see the crack babies, as they call them, as much as some of the other areas. But when a child comes into this world and they've already got an addiction,
Right.
it's a heavy cost to have that. I mean, and this is kind of a downer show for this time of year, but it is the fact, and we've got to do a better job, whether it's
And you wonder, at least I do, once that child has gone through the horror of trying to coming off of it as an infant, does that also create a proclivity to be an addictive proclivity as in the future for that child?
you know it's gonna,
And is that what we're seeing because of the drugs of the 60s and the 70s that
you and I grew up there.
we grew up with?
Well, we know now that addiction for some of these drugs is more mental. You know, it's up here. It blocks whatever you're trying to block. That helps you to get over that. I watched my dad, and he lived to be 86. But I remember him going through, him saying, "I am going to put those cigarettes down. I'm going to." When he was out in the fields working, he had a chew of tobacco in his mouth. And for him to make that commitment, and he was in his 60s and probably closer to 70, I remember how hard that was. They didn't have the products that we have today. They didn't have that educational model today. It was him making that decision after smoking for those many years or chewing for those many years. My grandmother lived a long life, but I never knew her that she didn't have snuff in her mouth. and that little bitty.
And that stuff kept you up. It was like a
Yeah,
joke.
yeah, and bless her heart, she lived to be 99, and she had a little can, and she put that snuff and put it in her apron, and had that little napkin, and she would never go out in public. But everybody knew the grandma dipped snuff. I'm not saying anything about my grandma. She's a wonderful person in the world, but she could never bust a habit. And she often told us as small kids that she would make us go get a switch if she caught us with any of those tobacco products. She knew, and we're talking about a lady that was born in the 1880s.
Wow.
And lived to be 99 years of age, but knew she couldn't get off from them. And I, there's a in my family, there's a long history of tobacco use.
In my family, it's alcohol.
And so
Same
all
thing.
of us,
Yeah.
I mean, none of us come with a clean slate when we're born into the world. I was talking to a gentleman just this morning. He's having to work very hard to keep his cholesterol down. He's thin, he's active, he's exercised, you would never, but looking at him, you wouldn't think he's got a cholesterol problem. I'm a big man, eat too much cornbread, eat too many, all those things, and
Green beans with fat
but
back.
I don't have, I love it, but I don't have a problem with cholesterol. Now I've got my issues I have to deal with, and all of us, in order to have this healthier, more vibrant community, livable community, Williamson County is known for the healthiest community in the state. But all of us have health issues
Right.
that we have to deal with. Now we're back to drugs.
And we take drugs
and
to
we
deal
take
with those
drugs
health
with a lot of
issues.
that. And so long as we take them the way they were intended, they're fine. But that's not what's happening in the world today.
Right.
So we're joining. We'll see. 5 years, 10 years, if you and I are still around, we'll say it was a good move, bad move, or it didn't even pan out. Doesn't cost us anything, only cost at the time of settlement. The lawyers, these big case lawyers, they take their money out of the settlement, and you get what's left over to deal with the products. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, if it makes a difference in what's going on in society with the addiction problem, then it's worth it.
Yes.
And
Or
that's the
brings
thing.
attention.
Right, and that's the thing that, but I also wonder if one of our issues is that we're not teaching our young people how to deal with problems. And so they try drugs to get, when they're sad, when they're depressed, and things like that, where we didn't have that option when we were growing up.
No, we didn't, but, it's a different world we live
Yeah.
in, and that's
I
not
mean,
what, that's not what this show's
No,
about,
but-
but you could do a
but-
whole show, you could do.
If we could just get a handle on something that would,
A lot of it, you could take, I've used this expression, we had 3 children, all 3 of them came out of the same oven, they just cooked at different temperatures. And they're all different. They're all different. And they all have their habits, they all have their
Yep.
things, and that's the way we're wired. But we've got to do a better job
Gotta
of
do it.
education.
Yeah,
And
we've got to do a better
warning
job of
people what can happen.
preparing,
That's for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah. But in the meantime, you've got your Christmas shopping done.
I have, this show is a showing about 10 days prior to Christmas, and we have a long-standing habit, talking about habits, the males in the Anderson family don't really get started till the 23rd. And I do not want to break that tradition. Unfortunately, I wish it was a habit, is because I never know what to get. So I'm very fortunate with all my grandchildren. I just write checks to the mommies and say, would you please find something from Papa? And here's how it's done. And certainly I don't even attempt to get my children anything anymore. It's just so much easier to write a check or a gift card. Because I get the wrong size, I get the wrong color, I get the total wrong.
You get the turtles instead of the Batman.
That's it. I don't know what I'm doing. I've got some good talents, but Christmas shopping is not one of them. But it'll get done.
And especially because now you've got so many grandchildren.
I know. I've got 9 of them, and I love every. I had the opportunity. This show's not about me and my family, but I had one of my granddaughters over this past Sunday afternoon, and her mom was wanting to do something. The boys wanted to go do something else. And I said, well, bring her over, and I try to do this. So she's 3.5, and so we did a Chex Mix, and we made chocolate chip cookies. Now, my kitchen looked like a
The Chex
war
Mix
zone.
exploded.
Chex Mix exploded, and flour, and all the things, and I love to cook. And she is so cute at 3.5, and her mother, my daughter, apparently doesn't let her crack eggs. She's in a hurry, and she wants her to help, but she's work and other kid. So this particular day, my granddaughter learned how. So I brought a dozen eggs out. I got to tell you this story. I brought a dozen eggs out, and she said, "Papa, can I crack the eggs?" And I thought, this is going to be a disaster. But yes. So the first one she hit against the inside counter of your sink, there was eggs just dripping. And it was so cute. And so we washed that off, and we did egg number 2. Then we did egg number 3. And we did egg number 4. We just needed one egg to go in those chocolate chip cookies. Each time she got a little better at it. But in the meantime, I'm getting a little worried, out of that dozen, am I going to be able to get one? And so she finally got it correct. And then when she went to kind of separate the egg, after it was cracked, the eggshells went down into the container.
So you got crunchy chocolate chip
So
cookies.
we got chunky chocolate chip, and you know what? Not one of those grandkids. We got most of them out, but there was a few little chunks in there, and they'll be all right after they're cooked.
And she had the experience.
She had the
learned how to do
experience,
it.
and so the memories were, I'm sure, for her, but they were really for me.
Yeah.
And I hope everybody gets that opportunity.
Yeah.
I know you're choking up, but we've got lots of things. Let's talk a little bit about the animal control director, our animal center. About 5 or 6 weeks ago, our current director, Laura Chevrier, who we all just cherished and loved, she had an opportunity to go to work at another organization in Nashville, Nashville Humane Society. It was good for her. and thus it had to be good for us, even though we didn't want that to occur. And she gave us the time and the opportunity, so she stayed a little bit, and so we've been recruiting. We've had some outstanding candidates. I don't know how much time we got left.
Just a couple minutes.
So we've had, we put out a solicitation for new directorships, and so we've interviewed folks from Georgia, Texas, Idaho, and several within the
People really want to come here.
Yes, they do. And the Animal Center that's off of Claudia Yates Drive has got a wonderful reputation. Our save rate is about 96%. Every animal that comes in, we're able to save or foster or in some way save that animal. Now, there are certain animals you have to put down from
Right.
time to time, the vicious dogs or diseased animal.
The really sick.
The really sick or the injured. But I am so proud of our volunteers. There's 200 plus, 250 plus of our volunteers and our staff. They work tirelessly. They're open 7 days a week, taking in animals. And at this particular time of the year, there is a propensity to want to adopt. But right after the first part of the year, they're going to come
brought
back
back.
in. They're going to
Yeah.
come back in. All of a sudden, that little cute little puppy has to go outside
Yeah.
every morning and night.
It's got to be fed a couple times a day.
It's got to be fed a couple of times. So those are things we have to take in consideration. I think we'll have a new director by the first part of February. A commitment for that may not get on board until March, but in the meantime, the staff out there is doing their job. I shifted one person over to kind of keep the ship rocking along and address those issues. But I am very encouraged by the people that have applied for this job with some excellent skill sets.
That's awesome. That's incredible. Well, we're about ready to wrap up this audition for this year, which sounds really ominous, of county happenings. And I hope you have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And I hope everybody out there has the merriest of Christmas and a wonderful New Year and Happy Hanukkah. That's going on. And we'll see you next year.
Children Born Anew at Christmas by Viraja R. Christmas is here, here, with jingles and Yule logs, cinnamon ciders and gingerbread figurines. The child within us beaming joyously, because a child was born so humble and holy. We children keep singing, joy to the world, carol along streets every year, growing with Christmas that never fails, to rekindle cherished memories, wrapped so lovingly, but crisply unwrapped each Christmas for sharing.